Saulderson Media, a really up and coming agency within the creator and influencer marketing world. So we're very fortunate to have him here. But also with me, as always, is my co-founder Joey, and we're here with Mogul, obviously fractional investing platform where you can get started for as little as $250. But that's not the focus today. Focus today is around the entrepreneurial journey of this man across from us. So Suhit, I would love it. I can give a background, but I don't think I would do it nearly enough justice as you would. So I'd love to hand it over to you, where you can just walk us through all things that's happened within your journey, how it is that you got started in entrepreneurship, what Saulderson Media is. I know that's a lot, so if you want to stop and ask questions, or feel free to, but really looking forward to hearing about it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me here, and really excited to share a bit about my journey and on this platform. So, quick introduction to myself in its current day. So, I'm Suhit Amin. I'm a 23-year-old founder of Saulderson Media, and essentially, we are a premium talent management and influencer marketing agency based out in the UK. What that means is that we have two main streams of the company. We exclusively manage content creators, help them grow, help them monetize, help them develop their careers online in this very growing creator economy, is that buzzword probably everyone sees getting thrown around everywhere. And on the other side, we work with brands mostly in the gaming, tech, entertainment, sort of lifestyle, online media sort of world, and help them, I guess, promote their products and services via influencers' audiences and have that as a kind of growth and marketing channel. I started the business almost 6 years ago, actually 6 years ago in July. So we'll be turning 6 years old in 1 month, which is awesome. And I started the business when I was 17 years old in high school. And the reason for starting the company is that I'd always been relatively entrepreneurial since the age of around 13 when I discovered video games. I was really into video games. I was really into um, just kind of creating content on YouTube. And from that kind of made me realize and work out the world of influencer marketing from that. So I discovered the sort of business side of YouTube, how content creators actually made money, the agencies and the brands behind the content creators, supporting them to make money. And that sort of interested me a lot more than being a content creator myself. So through the age of sort of 13 to 16, I just sort of volunteered at a bunch of online companies that were based around YouTube, gaming, and sort of the online media space. And then I got a full-time job when I was 16 at a company called ESL, which is the world's biggest esports company. And that was my kind of real big break into the influencer marketing world. It was my first sort of full-time paid gig, where I really learned a lot from a sort of the leading company in esports and gaming content creators. And then my story sort of turned a little bit dark at that point, because a month into that job, I was diagnosed with cancer, which is kind of the big catalyst that started me on my journey of like the entrepreneurship that I'm on right now. Um, I was diagnosed with a cancer called stage 2A Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is essentially a cancer of the lymphatic system, which connects to your immune system in your body. And that really, for me, was kind of like that second life, almost in a sense, when I realized that life can be short and I have to go out and really do what I want to achieve and follow my dreams and ambitions. So I decided to leave my job at ESL about 6 months into it in July 2018. And that's when I launched Saulderson. At the beginning, it was just mainly for a few reasons. One, as I say, I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I wanted to see that success, leave that legacy. Two, I was using it almost a distraction from the cancer that I was facing, because when I was so switched into trying to build this business, I almost forgot about the situation that I was in a lot of the time. And thirdly, I just been in that influencer world for 3 years prior to that, learned so much about it from the variety of jobs that I held. It made perfect sense for me to transition into that as my agency. So I launched this purely a talent management company at the time, just working with a few gaming content creators, helping them get brand deal sponsorships. And then since then, the agency's massively grown over the last 6 years. We're a team now globally with in the UK, US, and some in Europe. We work with some of the largest brands and content creators in the world, and execute huge projects for a variety of different sort of parties. So yeah, it's been a really exciting journey, and we're in a very different year now. It's sort of like I'm trying to build the business into sort of a longer term sort of corporate agency at the moment. I changed my mindset when I was younger. I was very much that sort of lifestyle business a mindset during my sort of early 20s. I mean, I'm still in my early 20s. I'm 23, but now I'm focused on that sort of next. Now I'm focused on that sort of next step and that sort of really formalizing the business with a very good leadership team and advisors and whatnot, and trying to scale to that sort of 8-figure plus valuation of the company and really build it the team globally. So that's a bit of my journey and where we're at today.
That is absolutely wild.
Incredible story.
Yeah.
Incredible story.
Yeah, we've gotten a chance to hear a bunch of these, and I mean, that knocks it out of the park. That's absolutely ridiculous. And at 18, I can't imagine, one, having to deal with Hodgkin's lymphoma, but then two, to even know how to start a company, much less make it as successful as you have. And pretty wild to take it from the lifestyle company to now it's becoming more a corporate grounding, so to speak. But I mean, if you wanted to take us off, Joey, with any
Yeah, I mean,
question. Yeah.
first of all, obviously, incredible story. Thanks so much for sharing. I think like it's so important to acknowledge kind of the North Star, right? Like the affliction that everyone has individually when they really light that fire into themselves and go off to start something on that journey. I think that's just incredible, and you've inspired all of us here already, and we're just getting started. One, before we dive into the more formal stuff, I wanted to ask, what was your first kind of game that introduced you into the gaming world, and what inspired you to get into that?
I think it was FIFA with my brother back
Nice.
on the Nintendo Wii back in the days.
That's
I used to
awesome.
play FIFA with him because I was big into football at the time. But I think the main sort of like I suppose esports game that got me into that realm was CS:GO, and that was the one that I played heavily, and that's what kind of got me into the ESL and really deep into the kind of like content creator world.
Very cool. I mean, yeah, there's a massive kind of economy that's created itself around games like CS:GO. How do you see kind of the world of the creator economy, whether it's, expanding kind of around top-down economics throughout kind of the world of esports and, managing all of these brands and players, or if you want to talk about specifics in the world of gaming, segmenting that into, lifestyle, like what kind of tell us a little bit about the creator economy, like how you see it and how you see it growing.
Yeah, I mean the career economy is massive now. I mean, as I say, it's like a buzzword everyone's throwing about everywhere because and it simply is just because it is absolutely huge to this day, and it's really developed over. I think it's had a massive development over the last probably year and a half comparative to what it was. I think it kind of stayed relatively similar. I mean, the career economy's technically been around for over a decade, but honestly think until like the last couple of years, it's sort of been the same thing as it is. But it's only really until the last couple of years where it's really developed into something where we're seeing a lot more opportunities coming from content creators. I mean, you look at some of the top creators like your Mr. Beast, your Sidemen, your Logan Paul, and these guys are celebrities now. These guys are building brands. They're building um, some of the top fastest growing companies in the world, really, like Prime, like Feastables. They're putting huge investments into projects like during specifically at this moment. The Sidemen, obviously the UK's biggest YouTube group, has done a £1 million reality TV show, right? Which is something that you would never usually see from content creators making content on YouTube. That's a full TV scale production, but it has massively developed to the point where I think that the kind of creator world is really competing with TV and mainstream TV now, like to the point where more people are heavily involved and watching, like the Sidemen reality show, for example. 350,000 people were watching that live at the one time, and you barely see that on normal TV anymore, especially in the UK. So that's going absolutely massive. I mean, a lot of the biggest companies now are creator focused. A lot of brands are very interested in having sort of like creator investments into them. There's a lot of creators that have started like joining and involved in VC funds as well, and investing in creator brands and building that forward. So I think it's massive. It's growing hugely. I think it's like over $100 billion industry, and it's only going to go and grow. And I think we're going to sort of see it just become more heavily mainstream. Everything's going to be very creator focused, and I do think that a lot of the future brands, and maybe similar to what you guys are doing, it's becoming very like founder and personality driven first, as opposed to back in the day where it was like very company and organization oriented. A lot of the upcoming businesses, and even from a at a high level, like Tesla, Twitter, everyone sees them because of Elon Musk, right? And he's an influencer and a creator in itself. And I think that's where the way that business is also going, is that it's going to be very like personality and creator driven at its heart. But I'm super excited about it, and I'm super excited to be a part of something that I think is going to grow massively over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think a massive catalyst of that was kind of the pandemic, right? I mean, when we were shut in, all we had was content, right? And that's where we
Yeah.
saw a lot of the biggest content creators of the day kind of start to shine and start to grow. So really, really cool to see that happen in the past few years. Do you have another comment?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm curious your thoughts around this, kind of veering off of, we have these questions, and keep in mind they're in order and they're technically, it crafts a great story, but I'm just curious about the hype cycle. Obviously the Feastables that you had mentioned, Prime that you had mentioned, these have grown exponentially and they're absolutely crushing. I think Feastables is one of the only top 10 candy bars not founded over 20 to 30 years ago, right?
Wow.
And so they're absolutely crushing it. Prime obviously has just grown tremendously well, signing on LA Dodgers, I think Man United or Man. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm gonna get.
I think I don't. I think it was. I think they've. I mean, they've signed a few teams. I think Arsenal is the main one in the UK because KSI is
Yeah.
an Arsenal fan. But I mean, it's hard to keep up because they're signing so many like big name celebrities and sports clubs as well. So you may be right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like the idea being that obviously some of these are really starting to take off and we're seeing exponential growth, and it's because we live in a world of kind of fast fashion and fast cycle and even faster cycles from a business marketing perspective. So in the creator economy, how do you see it where someone can create or at least inject themselves into a brand and create it for the long term? Because obviously Prime, if you read the most recent article that came out, Wall Street Journal, about a month or a few weeks ago, basically it's cratering in sales, and what used to be this collectible item that would resell for 20 to 30 times its original value is now on clearance sales at Target. And so how do you think that there's a way to sustain the hype around an influencer? Does it have to be around an influencer itself? Does it have to be around the brand itself? Does it have to be product driven? How do you envision a product long lasting with an influencer tied to it, even past any sort of relevancy around the product, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I completely agree with you. Is that everything goes through its hype cycles. Every single content creator is exactly the same. There are content creators who were massive 10 years ago who no one cares about anymore in the content creation world. You look at it like the likes of Casper Lee, who's massive in the UK, now is no one really follows him from his content creation. They follow him for his business. He's launched an influencer agency himself. And I think that, like, as you say, the relevancy thing, and especially with attention spans becoming so low, especially in this day and age, you have to be you have to kind of capitalize on that. So I think the main thing from like the creator economy perspective, in my opinion, is that it all starts, obviously the influencers kind of like the top of the funnel, really get that initial an initial kind of reach and eyeballs and impressions and kind of ability into the brand. But I think if the brand in itself isn't actually good, because a lot of these content creator brands are like white labeled or repurposed products, right? Because they can just sell with an influencer packaging. But I think that if they want to sustain the brand long term and really compete with the giants who have put years and years and have experienced teams and money into it, the product has to also stand on its own legs. I think the problem with Prime is that the product doesn't necessarily stand on its own legs, because it's not like any groundbreaking product. It's not like anything better, or even, and in a lot of cases, a lot of people don't even think it's that good. They just buy it because of the hype. So I mean, I've tried a few flavors. I like one of them. I don't like all of them. But I do think that, like, for creator economy brands to flourish and grow long term, they have to start with the creator, but the product has to be its own thing that can run by itself. Otherwise, once the creator loses relevancy, it's probably not going to go anywhere. And I think also, it has to become a very formalized business where, a big company like a PepsiCo or someone like this who has the resources, who has experience, would have to come and actually like pick it up or get some sort of joint investment involved to actually grow it longer term. Because everything does have its sort of expiry date when it comes to influencers, for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think it's getting beyond the hype, getting into the product too. And I do think product driven growth is the most sustainable, but I think the quickest to market is definitely influencer
Yeah.
related growth, because that's just someone trusts, and our next generation is full of, I trust that person, so I'm going to go along with that person type of thing, as opposed to like, I'm actually going to stray away from the pack, and I see this exact nutritional factor, this exact product is made with this and that. And so it definitely is. I'm curious if you
Yeah. No, signaling has become everything, right? For trust, just as Alex was kind of touching on, it's like you're going to trust something infinitely more if there's positive signaling towards it from your peer group, from those that you already trust. And one of the best ways to do that is through branding, right? Through a trusted brand. So couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, so just on that similar vein, maybe even shifting gears a little bit, like how does that long-term sustainable growth translate into kind of the management of financial growth for creators, and kind of just long-term sustainability in terms of reinvesting, right? 100% of your investment, whether it is from a cash flowing business like an agency, whether it is from a content created brand that you've established that's cash flowing, hundreds of $1,000s of every month. What's kind of the best way to invest that? Like, how have you seen do it? I know you mentioned before this call that a lot of content creators use real estate as a way to invest. Like, how do you see that kind of tying into the world of investment, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I kind of look at content creators similar to athletes. Like everyone has their sort of kind of, again, I don't want to say expiry date, but almost in a sense where it's like a footballer will not be playing football after the age of their mid-30s, right? Tennis player, the exact same, and a content creator is the exact same thing, right? A lot of these content creators are very hype, interesting, very energetic right now. But realistically, when they're in their 30s and they have kids, they're not going to want to be showing up to the camera every single day and pushing out content and producing content. So I think a lot of the larger content creators have to start, and a lot of them at that stage definitely have start thinking about that kind of, what is that long-term play, what is that long-term game, how can they use that money that a lot of these content creators can make hundreds of thousands very, very quickly off brand deals and ad revenue. How can they actually long-term build that for a sustainable future where after their content creation career is done, they don't need to necessarily do anything else. They're set up for life. And I work with a lot of content creators who are at that stage where they're probably on similar salaries to some sort of lower tier footballers, in a sense where they're on multiple hundreds of thousands a month. So I know some content creators who do millions per month just off of brand deals and ad revenue, and it's crazy. And I think really from there, it's just about diversification of that cash. What do they actually do with it? So a lot of the cases, a lot of the content creators, firstly, will reinvest that cash just back into their channels and into a team to actually kind of take their time away from it and potentially put more of a team on actually content. So that's the kind of first way that I see it. Secondly, it just really goes into more of those traditional investment vehicles, really, like most athletes or sports stars or celebrities do. A lot of them will invest into other businesses. A lot of them will invest just in the general kind of S&P 500, crypto, and real estate is one that I've seen pretty heavily from a lot of the UK content creators. I mean, quite a few that I'm relatively friendly with purchase lots of real estate and then run it as buy to let, and we kind of build a property company out of that as a kind of sustainable cash flow for in the future, where once they're done with content creation, they have tens of millions worth of assets that are just paying them monthly, and they can just live off of that. So I've actually spoken to quite a lot of like financial advisors who work specifically with content creators, work specifically with athletes, and it all kind of goes in the same general direction. I think a lot of these bigger content creators like the KSI, the Mr. Beasts, the Logan Paul, they are heavily diversified and invested in a number of businesses, real estate, SB. I think it's just diversification of the portfolio. But I do think that like content creators are very different in a sense to most people, because a lot of the time, like, they don't realize how wealthy they can become so quickly, and they just don't kind of understand like the financial implications. Because at the end of the day, a lot of them aren't business people. They're not have a business acumen. They're just fun, creative people. So a lot of them don't necessarily manage their money to the most effect. You see a lot of these, young content creators make their first 500K and go buy a Lamborghini or Ferrari, which is the wrong way to do it. But I think the ones that really get to that kind of more elite level, they then understand like what is the next play, what is the long term. I'm not going to be doing this in 5-10 years. What do I do with my money? And then a lot of them put it into those more sustainable revenue streams that can just kind of pay them dividends over time.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean that is a. I kid you not. In our notes that we have a Lambo effect.
Yeah.
Buying a Lambo with your first
Yeah.
500K is throughout the industry because technically it's a tax write-off. But at the same time, it's very curious that you kind of liken that journey, or you describe the journey really as the evolution from more of a lifestyle. I got to create content. I got to generate content as quickly as humanly possible. That's as good as the previous video, or if not better. And then the people that reach the upper echelon is when it starts to mature into an actual business enterprise and you have a team behind it. So you'd actually mentioned earlier in the conversation that with Saulderson Media, it has since transformed behind you, right? It started
Yeah.
out as more of a lifestyle. I just want to grow as quickly as possible. And now you're kind of making it more of a corporate, institutional, long-term longevity play. And so I'm curious, what are the struggles as you're growing it out, both from when it was starting out as that lifestyle type of company to now when you're starting to breach into this institutional, long-lasting relationships with the content creator as well as just overall corporate entity?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think that especially for someone who's young and has just been running this, like, I've just been running this myself as like a solo founder with little sort of like major experience in business prior to this. It's one of those ones where it's like there was a period of time where I just kind of like just didn't know like what's next. How do you go about doing this? So there's been a kind of there was always been a major struggle over the last couple of years where it's just like, how do I actually take this to the next level? What do I have? What inputs do I need to put into the business to have those sort of outputs with a certain multiple? And I simply just didn't know because it's my first time running. Well, it's my second business, but my first proper business because I started a business when I was 15 and it only lasted a month, so I don't really kind of write that one off. But this is like my first proper business where it's like I'm 23. I've never really worked in a corporate structure or in a larger agency to understand how it's all how the makeshift is set up. So it's kind of just a struggle of like I guess that lack of knowledge in a sense, of like the knowledge gap of like how do you go from being an agency that generates multiple seven figures a year to an agency that generates multiple eight figures a year? How do you start kind of planning, your forward hiring plan and what people do you need to put into place? What is actually going to lead to a higher valuation of a business and an agency business. One of the things in the agency business is actually a back office team is surprisingly, which to my surprise is actually quite a high value thing because it, provides you more structure to a potential buyer and all of these things. So for me, that was one of the biggest struggles was just kind of like we had a period of time where we're just kind of like plateaued at a certain level purely because I just didn't know what that was, what that next step needed to be. So since then, about 8 months ago, we'd onboarded a sort of non-exec director chair who's previously has grown and exited two businesses, one being a successful digital marketing agency. And it's just and one of the things that I've seen is just it's very useful to have someone in that kind of position who's been there, done that, and kind of pave the way and almost be that helping hand and that stepping stone of like, this is what you were doing wrong and where you need to fix it and what you should be doing next and who you need to bring on next and how you formalize things. So that is kind of one of the bits that I'm doing at the moment and really just learning from people with more experience than me in this game and who have been there longer for a longer period.
Definitely, it's kind of the mentorship. Every business has it, even entrepreneurship, because you need someone to show you where to go. People have done a lot of things, very cool things, innovative things, and the process is very similar and kind of relating to one another, but actually being taught exactly what they did that worked well provokes thought about what would make your business grow. And so I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and just thinking about kind of growing businesses too. I know we had a chance to mention kind of Saulderson Properties with a little bit more of a personal venture, but you're working on that on the side. Talk us through that, kind of what you're seeing in the world of real estate where you are, and how we can talk you through it too.
Yeah, I mean, so I started that basically out of it was less of at the time, a sort of smart move for me. It was more of like a necessity at the time. So essentially, I was in university at University of St Andrews, and one of the big problems you have up there is that there is low supply of housing and very high demand from students. So the rent prices are very, very high, but there's also just very few places to be able to actually rent for students. So going into my third year, I was running the business through uni. Things were going well. Very low costs at the time for the agency and the position that we were at, and I couldn't find anywhere to stay. And I was just struggling to find anywhere that I was able to actually rent. Like in St Andrews, it would have to be further out, which is a bit logistically of a nightmare. So I just started looking into the property market around there. I was like, surely if it's this hard for me to find a place, and the rent seems to be so high for a lot of students, it must be quite a good place to invest in. So I had a financial advisor at the time who kind of worked through me, sort of like trying to find a place to stay there ultimately. And the idea was that I bought a 2-bedroom flat in St Andrews. I lived there for 1 year with a flatmate who'd paid me rent, and then over summer we Airbnb'd it, because St Andrews is also a very hot spot over summer for the golf, because has all the golf courses, and the rents are very, very high for students. And then also over summer the Airbnb rental was very high as well. And to add to that, the Golf Open Championship was being hosted in St Andrews that summer as well. So it was a really good time because the Airbnb price was actually inflated massively at that point as well. So that's been an interesting one, just from that end. So there's that, and then there's another one. There's two up there, kind of just in the same thing, where it's 9 months of the year rental to students, and then 3 months of the year, from June, July, August, Airbnb through the summer months. And it's been an interesting one, because it's like it's super cool to see, like, having a property in a location where you are never not having people staying, which is not a problem this problem we don't face. Is, we have too much demand, obviously, from students wanting to rent, and then over summer it's pretty much not always booked out, minus one or two days, both of the years. And it's obviously one of those ones where it's it's interesting. It's good cash flow on that end, as well. And it's also just one where it's like, now I have my money used in some place that is an asset and is a wealth building asset. If I had that cash that I had just sat there, wasn't really doing anything. Now it's in an asset that is going to go up in value, and it is also cash flowing me money on a regular basis. So that is somewhere that is of interest to me, is just kind of like, as an agency entrepreneur who has a cash flowing business, and agencies tend to cash flow very nicely, is where do I then invest my money into other areas. So property is definitely one of those ones where it's one of these markets where it's just like tried and tested and over centuries, where obviously everything's got a risk to it, but there's a lot more limited risk, I think, than a lot of the more new investment opportunities. But what I didn't realize, being in the property game, is that there's a lot more headache on the buy to let space than I initially thought of, like tenants and things going wrong and breakages and whatnot. And I guess that kind of leads on to, I suppose, why platforms like you sort of exist as well, because you can have that sort of real estate syndication model where you don't actually have to deal with any of the problems necessarily, but you're obviously benefiting from the yield on the properties and whatnot.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I'm curious though, what obviously you pointed to the financial advisor as something that it made sense to go into real estate, but prior to it, was there any sort of sentiment that you had, either as it being a massive wealth generator outside of the financial advisor part? Because obviously, within one of the exercises that I did when we were starting this out, when we were cultivating kind of a brand behind Mogul and what our purpose was the thought that the minute that you bought a home, you felt almost invincible. Like that day, all of a sudden, every joke hit harder, every conversation was more interesting, and you felt like you were walking with some sort of levity to you. So I guess with that, the idea being, did you have any sort of that sentiment towards real estate prior to getting into real estate, or have you felt it since then? And if so, what do you think amongst groups like startup founders, creators, or influencers? Do they share that similar sentiment, or is it more so as I need a place to park cash as that sentiment? So like, what was your?
No, I definitely think. I think for every single person around the world, there is the same sentiment that when you get on the property ladder, when you own a property, it's like that is a huge milestone in every single person's life. It's like you are at a stage where you can put your money into an asset and a physical thing that tangibly you can own, that you can live in, you can make money out of, and in most cases will grow in value. And yeah, definitely, I mean, I always have that sentiment in my mind of like, when I can get into property, when I can purchase a house, that's like huge for me, to just be able to know that I've almost like, it's that first step to kind of like, not necessarily making it, but making it in your journey as an individual and as a person. And it's obviously a very big aspiration and goal of everyone. And I do see the same from content creators. A lot of up and coming creators, I see regularly people tweeting or people posting in IG stories of like, huge, feeling for them to be able to go off their content creation career and buy that first property and buy their first home and be able to move out of wherever they were, move into that dream apartment. And it is the case. I think definitely is like a status symbol feeling for sure of like, being able to call yourself that. So yeah, I definitely think so. And I think minus the financial advisor part, like my family, I come from a family of doctors, but they were very big on basically turning their salaries into property. So my grandparents, my uncle have been very heavily vested in property as like their main sort of I suppose like alternate their main sort of investment vehicle has always been property in the family. And it's one of those ones that's kind of like I've known about for a while, but it was just I hadn't thought about it at that specific point until I had the necessity to get it, and then I realized that actually this makes a lot of sense, because after a certain period of time of paying back down the mortgage and everything. But I guess after you start paying down the mortgage, everything above that is just pure profit really to kind of enjoy. And after you get a certain number, really, if you're able to get a certain number of properties under your belt, you're pretty much set up in most cases as it cash flows you, depending on obviously your needs, I suppose, on a monthly basis and your costs that you have.
Yeah, no, I kind of resonate with that a little bit too. I'm from a family of doctors. My grandpa joked that you could become anything in the world, but you had to be a doctor first. And so 4 of his 5 kids went into doctor and became a doctor. And he also was big in the property. I mean, he was like,
Yeah.
he didn't have like a million properties, but he was just very interested
Yeah.
in properties and was like, I'd love to treat this as an ATM one day where I could just take it out and refi and pull it out. But
Yeah.
obviously that kind of got me hooked on real estate. But I mean, do you have any last questions that you want to ask? I know that obviously we're very grateful for you taking the time today. But if you have any questions, any fun questions, anything like that.
No, yeah, I don't want to take up too much more time. I think, definitely some really interesting thoughts as you kind of mentioned your perspective, especially coming from the creator world of how we should be thinking about real estate, how kind of like you were saying earlier, like we also treat real estate kind of like our interest bearing savings account, right? Mogul kind of allows you to invest your, disposable income, right, into something that you can then treat as a savings account instead of just letting it sit there, not putting your money to work, right? One of the biggest things that you've kind of told us is it's important to be able to put that money to work right away and not have it sitting there losing interest. So I think that definitely sparks some inspiration in us and how we market kind of the value proposition, kind of how we think about our audience. But really
Yeah,
interesting conversation.
I mean, I was saying this to Thomas when we were first chatting. I think that just back in the property thing specifically, is that for me, looking at property for before I understood a lot about it, I always saw it as one of these things where it's like it's got such a high barrier to entry because you need like a certain amount of cash to purchase a physical place, and that's what everyone. I think when everyone sees property, they think I need tens of thousands, hundred thousands of dollars to buy a physical thing.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, and I think one of the things obviously that you guys have is a value proposition. And I only discovered this actually back in 2022 was the whole idea of real estate syndication, because I'd met a friend out in Cape Town who was heavily in real estate and syndication, where they would come together with a group of people, put smaller checks down and invest in certain kind of property elements. That was still relatively higher ticket. But I think what is interesting about your guys' proposition is that you kind of make it an accessible route that people can invest in, which I mean, a lot of people don't put money into property because they just think that they can't, right? So it's one of those ones where it's like they can have an alternative investment route as you say, as low as $250, and everyday people can put that as an opportunity. Instead of putting money into a savings account that pays no interest, they'll put a bit in maybe the in an ISA and there's S&P 500, then they can maybe put a bit into property and ultimately yield more. And I think it's such an interesting one for like the everyday person, that, as I say, may have just the wrong idea of how high a barrier to entry there is to the market.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love what you had said too, because it's like everyone has that knowledge barrier, and it's the biggest barrier to enter in all of real estate. I think I actually said it to someone the other day who asked me, "How do I get involved in real estate?" And so, outside of platforms like us, where you can invest $250 and get tested, get started out with it, and kind of grow from there, it's really just putting your head down and treating it almost like a goal seek formula, in the sense
Yeah.
that I know the end goal is to own that property. There are millions of ways to get there at different capital levels. If I put zero down, if I put 5% down, if I put 20% down. So as long as you treat it as end goal is to buy property and buy sound quality investments in property, there really isn't anything stopping you. There are a million paths to get there, and everyone has their own unique way. You don't have to buy it all cash. You can buy it with 0% down. You can
Yeah.
figure out ways of kickback. You can add in licensing, real estate licensing to get kickback. And so that's at least the way I approached it, where the first property that I owned, I think I ended up putting down less than 10K on a 520K home, but had
Yeah.
technically 5 to 10% of equity already in it due to
Yeah.
kickbacks.
Yeah.
And so there are a million ways to go about it. But I mean, really appreciate you having on. This was incredibly insightful from our lens, because obviously we deal in the real estate world. So learning about the creator economy, learning about the entrepreneurial journey. I mean, thank you so much for joining today. This has been incredible. I'd love it if you have anything that you want to kind of shout out on your end, or if there's any last thing that we should be asking you, or last thing you wanted to say, I can turn it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, nothing else to add. I really enjoyed the conversation and kind of discussion around creators and then to property, but nothing specifically. I guess the only thing to shout out is that if anyone's interested in learning more or asking more questions to me, they can just reach out on any social platform. Really, it's just the lucky thing is I have a very uncommon name, so it's just Suhit Amin everywhere, and you will probably find me. I'll probably be the only one. So if anyone wants to reach out, has any questions around creator economy, just entrepreneurship in general, my story, then yeah, you can just you can do that. But that's everything on my end. I really appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm going to turn off the live stream now, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for all of the fans out there for joining us. And definitely check out the properties, because they've been absolutely outperforming at mogul.club. But thank you so much, Suhit.
Awesome.